3D printing, always a pain when something doesn't go wrong. Don't even know where to start looking for the problem. Is it the print? Is it the printer? Did something go wrong? Do I have bad filament? These are all questions that we all run into when we try to. So today, join me as we talk about just some basic starting off troubleshooting steps to get you 3D printing to that good print. See you inside. Hi, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about how to troubleshoot a failed print. Now, there are tons of ways to do this, and I'm only going to talk about a few things that could go wrong, but I'm also going to give you the mindset on how to try to troubleshoot your print and what some key things that I run into a lot that are my problem or things that I just don't think about. So some of this may be mechanical, some of this is going to be software, getting our file ready in Cura and making sure we're ready for the printer to do the job. So this channel is about getting your 3D printing journey started as smooth as we can. So is it difficult to 3D print? Yeah, you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail a lot. Honestly, I fail all the time. These are my good prints behind me. But I don't want you to fail like I had to fail. I've spent 2 years along the journey of getting 3D printing and getting somewhat good at it. And I want to kind of help you skip some of that problems I ran into, some of the discouragement I ran into. Now, is there going to be problems? Yes, you're going to run into problems. It's just the way it is. Something's going to go wrong because you're either trusting a model from somebody you don't know on Thingiverse, or your settings for some reason changed when you opened up the model. Who knows? Filament may have broke mid-print and jammed your printer. You never know what's going to happen. 3D printing is a skill and an art, but the basics of 3D printing is not making that file perfect, not having my printer in pristine running condition. It's your troubleshooting skills. That's where you're going to succeed, at your ability to troubleshoot problems. Now, I'm not saying you're always going to have a problem with a print. This guy over here, printed him on the first try. I was amazed that I got him on the first try. It's kind of one of those things that sometimes you get a good print and you're like, yeah, I'm awesome. Sometimes you're just dumbfounded by a print and go through a ton of PLA and a lot of waste and just get discouraged and just don't want to do it anymore. I see it out on Facebook all the time in the marketplace. People selling their 3D printer. I just didn't have time for it. Couldn't get the hang of it. Just too difficult. It's not. It really isn't. With some basic troubleshooting skills and following some of the directions that are even in the book, there's tons of other YouTube videos on how to do this stuff. I'm just one person telling you. But I want you to keep engaged, especially if you're just starting that journey, because I was there 2 years ago. And I want you to print. I want you to make things that excite you, that you want to make on yourself. Get into Fusion 360, get into Tinkercad, create your own files, your own items to print. Who knows what you can do with this technology? But this key part is you got to be able to get through some of the problems. And that's what we're going to kind of tackle today. It's just some of the problems. And if you like what you see on this video, what you hear, hit that subscribe button. It really does help us out. I like you to follow us on the journey. Hit that bell so you get notifications every time I put out a video on a Friday or a Tuesday. So join us. Leave a comment down below. I try to reply back and actually help people get through with problems. It's key that if you're taking this journey, you've made the investment in a printer, let's get you moving. Let's get you making awesome stuff like what's behind me, or if there's something that you want to make that you think can be a business, let's get you moving forward. That's the key to this video. So as we move on, the first item we're going to talk about is the dreaded and pain in the butt supports. See you at the computer. Okay, so here we are. So I've got Cura pulled up. I've got a model pulled up. Now this is an interesting model. So this is a camera link to the stands that I have on my cameras for my printer so I can move it back and forth. It's a interlock link system. This is one of the pieces of that system. So we've got it in the slicer. I've got this set up for my Curality Ender 3. As you can see, it's a pretty simple print. A little weird there in the center. So like I said, I want to talk about support. So we're going to scroll down to support. I've got it checked to generate a support because that's not going to stand together when it prints. It's just going to fall apart. So we need a support. So one thing that I get a lot of questions about, and I see a lot of questions about, is, well, how does support work? So I have mine using a zigzag, it's basically filler that goes in here that as it prints up, it'll hold this up as it prints. Now, Cura is the software that I use to make my STL files. And one of the things that not a lot of people know is this support overhang angle. The higher it is, up to 90%, as you go up to 90, from 0 to 90, it's going to get less and less support. So at 90%, there's no support. We're done. I ain't helping you. So if I, for example, I slice this real quick, it's going to slice quick. It's a small model. And I preview this, it's at 85% right now. I have rafts turn on as well. So you can see we've got stuff in there now. That down. And you can see it's putting in some supports as it comes up to help that build. That's awesome. So without those supports right there, it isn't going to work. Now, if I dump this down to 20, the closer I get to 0, the more support I'm going to see. Now, the problem is, you don't want too much support, but you don't want too little. And as you can see, it's putting all kinds of support in the center there now. You can see these lines right here in this grid. It's putting in more support to help it build. Now, one thing I caution, and it's putting support outside so it can help build up the ball, which is great as long as that support comes off easy. As you can see, my settings over here are pretty standard. Support density is pretty low at 10%. 0.2 is my support Z distance, support top distance, blah, blah, blah. So I've got a lot of settings in here. And if you've got a question, please don't hesitate to ask my settings. But knowing where you need support and when you need support is a very big thing. Because if I've seen people just do, oh, support overhang 0, okay, and their entire model is nothing but support. It's a waste of PLA. It's a waste of time. Look at that. That is all support in there that isn't needed. You've got to find a balance with your printer to get that support to work right. And so while we're talking about supports, the other thing I see is as the printer moves from bit to bit, so let's do this. Open files. And we're just going to put another link in here. We're going to add more. We're going to have 2 in here. We'll scoot that over. We'll slice it. As it goes back and forth and works on this, sometimes there's thin little supports coming up from the table. And I've still got this at a high support, and it knocks it over. It's so annoying, right? So what you got to do is Z-hop when retracted. So what this does is it puts a little bit of height. It lifts up a little bit, moves over, then drops back down, and keeps on your print. So it's not just coming over going BAM! Like a car smashing into a wall. So that's another setting with supports. Avoid supports when traveling. Yeah, we want to avoid your supports. We want retraction enabled. We want these items in play to help, especially if you're doing multiple different pieces on the plate. Now, a lot of times I only do one piece at a time. Yes, it's slow, it's monotonizing, it sucks, but sometimes you get a better print just by doing one piece at a time. Sometimes I'll throw 8 on there and be like, it'll be fine. If it's fragile, or if it looks weak, or if it's thin, do it one at a time. You're going to get a better print. But support is commonly something I see because one thing, like this is too much support. Just period. You just got to kind of play with it. Look at your model and see if it's enough. A lot of times, honestly, I'm in the 75 to 80 range, depending on what I'm printing. Because it's also the other thing you got to take into account when you do this is placement on the table. So what am I saying by placement on the table? So support is one thing, but also it's your orientation on the table. You know, we move it back and forth. We've got it set where we want it. We think it's good. But could it be better? Why won't this print better if I did this and flipped it over? And let's make sure that's sitting at 0 on our Z. It is. Maybe this will print better. So let's slice it. Let's see how much support we see a difference between the two pieces. Let's pop over to preview. And look at that. It felt it needed support pushing all the way up versus just having support in the bottom here. That's how Cura calculated it to make sure these didn't get knocked and wobble. So it's kind of one of those things. You've also got to look at the placement of your item on the table for your supports, for your print, one of all too. You got to look at how to do that. So just kind of take that into thought, move it around, lay it the way you think's best. One thing too that Cura has, it does have a set face to align to the build plate and also lay flat. I'm not going to say this is the best option in the world. A lot of times I'll hit that and I'll be like, meh, doesn't work. And I'll try my own things to try to get it to sit the way I want it to sit, to use as little filament as I want. Because when you slice that, the cool thing about Cura, I'm on 4.62, I think is what I'm on. I haven't updated to the newest one. It's going to tell you right here how much filament you're actually using in this print. So play with your orientations. See if the number goes up and down. You know, you got to figure out what you want to do to make it sit and print easiest as possible. This orientation works well. It worked well with the amount of infill that I had. I think I printed these at 80 infill, and it worked great. But that doesn't mean every printer is going to do this, because I printed one piece at a time, and it worked fine. I didn't do a bunch of them because I didn't want them hopping back and forth. But if you do have them hopping back and forth, make sure you got Z-hop going on. That way it doesn't keep, the nozzle isn't drug over, it clips it, knocks your supports off, because that's what drives me nuts, is when a support gets broken halfway through a print, and it's because I didn't check mark that stupid box of Z-hop when retracted. I make this mistake a ton of times. It'll open up, and for some reason it's not checked. I had to make it a habit to check this. I always come down and check this, and then I check and go through my supports and see what I've got when I'm slicing the file. It's annoying, yes, but you want to make sure you're getting this right, because not only do you need to make sure you're generating support, we're going to move on to the next part, is your bed adhesion. What works best? Now, build plate adhesion. There's a two-phase problem here. One, there's what we're going to tell the printer to adhere to, and then there's going to be what we're going to tell, basically it's going to be what our printer does. Is our bed level? I can't preach it enough. Level your bed, level your bed, level your bed. That 9 times out of 10 is a lot of the problem, is your bed has just become unlevel. Oh, I printed, it was fine on the last print, I'll just run it again. Your level can change very easily. It could be you bumped your carriage and it's changed the alignment. Your wheels have worn down on your axis and it's not moving the same way it did before. It's gotten loose or something. Your bed level gets thrown off by multiple components, because your bed has to be level to that nozzle. If the nozzle changes or the bed changes, because when you pull that last model off, you could have pulled and changed the alignment of your bed. It's always worth it to check your bed before you start printing. So I'm going to get off that high horse and that sandbag right now. Let's talk about bed adhesion in here. So, and also don't forget to wipe down your bed with isopropyl alcohol. Blah, 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 blah. That's important too. You want to make sure your bed's good and clean so you get good adhesion as well. So, software-wise, what we need to tell our printer to do for adhesion. So, this one, I did a raft. It built the layer and then it built that on top of that because it gave me more contact points with the bed. Now, could I have used another one? I could have probably done a brim, which brims are basically, it puts out PLA on the table, connects it like a raft, but it's empty underneath the item. And I'll show you here. So you see it's funneled out just like the raft, but if I scroll down into the print, it built inward as well, but it's all, the bottom of the print is actually touching the plate. That's a little bit different. Now, some people do a skirt. Let's slice that, and I'll show you that one. No layers to show. Yeah, I know, because I'm slicing something. Shut up, computer. So, now we did the skirt. It did this line outside. That's all it did. Everything else is on the plate. Directly on the plate. So what can happen is this: if you've got small support structures going up, that's all it gets to connect to that plate. Not a lot of adhesion points for the plate. That's why a brim is good. A raft I like using. Some people do it without any. Now, I use Creality printers. I have most of mine on a glass bezel, I think but one, but that printer's going away. I do everything on the Creality glass. It's got the carbonized glass in there. It works really well. I usually don't need anything. I see people posting online about using hairspray, glue, stuff like that. I don't use that. I haven't had to. Now, if you're using like just a piece of glass or a mirror, yeah, that adhesion can help. I see people get angry because it's so stuck to the glass they can't get it off. Your nozzle might have been a little too close and it pressed it into the glass to cause that issue. There's a lot of things that could cause that issue, but basically when you're troubleshooting a model, one of the key things, I talked about supports, I've talked about bed plate adhesion. One of the things you need to make sure you're looking at is it my printer or is it the model? Is it a mechanical issue or is it a problem with the print, with the actual model itself? That's always the trickiest one to get into. But bed plate adhesion, a lot of times that's where you're going to see your first hint of a failure of a print, because you're not going to get that first good couple, even just the first layer not good is extremely problematic. So you want that good first layer, so make sure how you want that layer to go down. Do you want the brim so it's actually tighter and connected? Do you want to build it all on the raft so everything's held on? Because that's the cool thing about a raft or any of these is you can adjust the margins. So I'm printing something narrow but tall and I want that to hold on to the plate. Well, I can jump that up to a 30 millimeter raft, and I know it keeps telling us no layers to show. And here's what it's going to do. Look how much bigger that raft is. It expanded it out, giving those points more plate connection. Now, is this always going to save what you're doing? No, it may not. But sometimes if like you're printing something slender and tall, having a little bit of a wider brim can help. That little brim and all that weight up on top, the load is distributed across the entire raft. So that's one way that you can help do this. Now, is this the right way for everybody to do it? Probably not. So each of us do stuff in their different ways. I am a fan of a raft. I like using rafts from time when it's something that I'm printing that I know is slender and tall. I will usually always go to a raft. A lot of times I'll use a brim. I rarely ever use a skirt. If I'm doing a skirt, why? Just go with none. It's just kind of one of those things that just kind of depends on how I want this to look. But that margin is usually 5 millimeters enough, depending on what you're doing. Now, like I said, tall and narrow, I make that out. Now, the other things too is your air gap is important. That's going to be a trial and error for your printer. My Ender 0.3 works great. I can pull that raft off, usually with no real problem. Raft smoothing, but it's just kind of one of those things. You got to play with it to know what you're doing, and that's all part of this troubleshooting technique. But that's it. All I'm going to talk about, plate adhesion. So let's talk a little bit more about troubleshooting. Is it the printer? Is it the model? If it's a problem with the printer, it's going to be pretty evident. It's probably going to be mechanical. My filament broke going through the extruder, or I got clogged and I've got clumps and filament that's not even there, or it looks like a cobweb, a spider's web where it should be solid filament. The mechanical issue, kind of common. It's going to happen. These are machines. Stuff can clog, stuff can break. Power outage. Not much we can do about that one except put a UPS on your printer and pray. Now, some of these printers have print on resume. It works for most of the time. It works as long as you get to it pretty quick, but sometimes it just your print's failed. And it's one of those things. It's going to get discouraging talking about some of this stuff because prints fail. That's just the way it is. There's going to be mechanical issues. So just kind of look through from the start with the filament on how it goes to the plate. Look for breaks. Look for a bunch of filament grinds up on your extruder. Pretty much can tell you something ain't coming out the other end. It may be time to change the nozzle. You're not getting even flow. Could be a it could be a firmware problem with your printer. As you saw in my video on the Ender 3 V2, my firmware, it just wouldn't turn my extruder. It was really weird. But as soon as I updated, everything worked great. I can't really tell you why, but you got to just kind of look at each step of the process as you go through. Is my bed level? Is my bed moving smoothly? A lot of times those wheels underneath can get loose and just need tightened every once in a while. It's just kind of going through, making sure stuff looks right on your printer. So off to the final one, where we started all of this. Is it my model? Troubleshooting a bad model, or troubleshooting a model, period. So troubleshooting models can be tedious. Whether it's a model you made, a model you found out on Thingiverse or Cults 3D or any of the sites that I frequent, it can be painful to find a print that works. So kind of one of those things. I have my settings on here. I'll go through and adjust what I need to I adjust my infill every once in a while. I don't like 40%. That's bleh. But depending on what I'm printing, I may need more infill, I may need less. For these models, I don't do very much infill. Why? They're sitting on a shelf. They don't need to be heavy. They don't need to be uber strong. So it's one of those things, you got to just kind of troubleshoot what you're doing. Another common problem is the temperatures. Some of the models will knock your setting out. You got to make sure you're at the proper temperatures for your filament and your bed. Like right now, I'm running my bed at 50 degrees C. Here in a little bit, I'll probably be running that bed at 60 when winter gets here. Just because I know it's going to be a little bit colder down here, which means my plate's probably going to be colder. Running at 60 to keep it more temp, probably something I'm going to have to do. You may have to adjust your speeds depending on what you're trying to print, especially if you're changing something. I print most of my stuff at a 0.4 nozzle. You want really fine detail, you got to knock it down to that 0.2, slow it down, but you got to come in and adjust the speed levels and all that. You got to enable your retraction. Check that you're doing your Z-hop so it doesn't just smack your model off. The model starts here. Well, the model starts at wherever you're designing or downloading it, but the model's journey onto your printer starts right here. This is what is going to tell your printer what to do. So you got to come in here and just tweak settings. If you put it on your printer and the printer just knocked it off and it was only a little bitty piece holding it on the plate, then maybe you need that brim. Maybe you need that raft to help hold that on the plate so the printer can build it. So those are just kind of things you have to think through as you're troubleshooting these prints. Now, I went over a lot of stuff really fast. I basically touched on 4 things: supports, plate adhesion, physical, mechanical issues with the printer to go through and check, and then I talked about the software here. Could it be the slicer is actually causing a problem? Yeah, it could be that print and that slicer just aren't going to work. It's just kind of one of those things. You got to do some trial and error. You're going to have failure print. But what I'm going to tell you, don't give up. Don't give up if you've done this. So if you've liked anything you've heard me say today, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Let us know we're doing a good job. Ask us questions. Please, it makes it easier. Your questions help me make videos. And believe me, if it's one of those things that is very much out there and needs to be talked about, who knows? Maybe I'll actually ask you to join me on the video. But keep printing. Keep going. We'll see you guys next time. I appreciate your time. See you next week.